Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and before we start this video today, I do want to make a couple of corrections to my previous video that I made talking about some of the matchups that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could have in round number 1 of the playoffs. A lot of you guys pointed out to me in the comments section, and I greatly thank you for this, that the Buccaneers could still play 1, the New York Giants, who still have the possibility of winning the NFC East. 2, they could also still play the Green Bay Packers. And then 3, they could also still play the New Orleans Saints, depending on how certain situations go. I didn't include those 3 teams in my previous video just because the Buccaneers playing any one of those 3 teams seems more unlikely to me than them playing the other 3 teams that I mentioned in the video. But just to be real quick here before we get to the topic of today's video, I put my thoughts on the Giants in the comments section, and they're very similar to my thoughts on the overall Cowboys and how the Buccaneers would match up against them. And then my thoughts on the Saints and the Packers fall more in line with what my thoughts were on the Seahawks, although I would say definitely the Saints would be the hardest team for the Buccaneers to face, and I would still say either the Cowboys or the Giants would probably be one of the better matchups for the Buccaneers to have. But with those corrections being made, guys, in this video today, we're going to be talking about the question, should the Tampa Bay Buccaneers consider resting some of their starters in their Week 17 matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons? Now, I know Bruce Arians has already gone on record and said that they're basically going to go full guns blazing. They're going to play all their starters in their Week 17 matchup versus the Falcons, and this does make sense considering that, yes, they are still, not exactly set in stone as the 5th seed in the playoff picture right now. It is definitely more likelier than not, I would think, in my opinion, but it is still not guaranteed. They still need to win their Week 17 matchup versus the Falcons. And, this is still a very important game to finish out the year for momentum purposes, to make sure nobody gets hurt, and all these other different types of things. But should Bruce Arians still consider resting some of his starters that could have a high-level impact in the Buccaneers round 1 playoff game? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I've really divided this up into 2 categories. I divided it up into a few players that I feel the Buccaneers should consider resting in week number 17. And I have also listed some players that I feel the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should not rest in the week 17 matchup. So let's actually get started with that list, the players that should not be resting in week number 17. Number 1, it is Tom Brady, which I know may surprise a lot of people considering that Tom Brady, he is up there in age, 43 years old. A lot of people may say, well, yeah, of course you would want to rest him. You want Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, to be ready for the Buccaneers' first playoff game in 13 years. Of course, he has got to be the guy who has got to be the most ready on this football team. And I do agree with that, but I do think it is still fair to say that Tom Brady should go out there, continue to work on his chemistry with his wide receivers still and his offensive line and just the entire offense as a whole. I want Tom Brady going into the first playoff game with the Buccaneers warmed up, hot, if you will. Because right now, Tom Brady's on a great hot streak of play. He's been playing absolutely out of his mind recently, and I want him to continue that and have a lot of momentum in his favor going into the Buccaneers' first playoff game. I don't want Tom Brady going in, taking a week off, relatively cold, things like that. Granted, it is Tom Brady, so how cold could he really get? Not really anywhere compared to any of the other quarterbacks in the NFL, but still, I think that it's important for Tom Brady to continue on the momentum that he has been making for himself, keep himself heated up in terms of his overall play, and go into that round 1 matchup fired up and ready to go with a streak of very solid play following that round 1 game. So Tom Brady is the first person on this list. The second person on this list is going to be Buccaneers wide receiver Mike Evans. Makes a lot of sense. The man is literally only 39 yards away from having his own NFL record, that record being the most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start off a career. He would be breaking Randy Moss's record, which he's right now tied with. So yes, Mike Evans should play in this game simply because of the fact that that man deserves this record. I mean, Mike Evans is on a Hall of Fame caliber pace right now. He has had, a lot of different quarterbacks throw the ball to him. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh McCown, Jameis Winston, and now the GOAT Tom Brady, and he has been able to work with every single quarterback that he has been given. He is an all-star caliber type of talent, and I'm very happy to have Mike Evans on this team. I have a whole video talking about him later on this week, but yeah, the main reason Mike Evans should play in this game is because, 1, I want him to have the record. His teammates want him to have the record. The coach coaching staff wants him to have the record. I'm sure he wants to have the record himself. So Mike Evans, get out there and make some NFL history for yourself. The next player I have listed is going to be Devin White. One of the biggest reasons I have Devin White listed here is because he is still a younger player. Surprisingly, I know that a lot of people don't think about this aspect, but Devin White's still only in his second year in the league. He still needs game time experience, especially before his first ever NFL career playoff game. You can say this for a lot of guys, Mike Evans included. So I want as much time, as many snaps as possible to build up as much momentum and experience for guys like Devin White and guys who have not been in the playoffs before. Tom Brady, like I said, not too worried about. I just want him to be on a hot streak. But for guys who aren't as ready or, have never been to a playoff game before, these guys have got to get some more snaps in so they are just, kept mentally sharp, mentally aware. They're on all their P's and Q's. Devin White fits into that category perfectly. Also, he's very close to getting double-digit sacks in his own right. I want to see him hit that number. So with that being said, Devin White, I definitely want him to just continue to garner experience and get himself overall ready for round number 1. And then the last two guys, again, fit into this category, that being Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr., much like in the case of Devin White. Both those guys have been playing absolutely amazing this year throughout their rookie seasons, Devin White being in his second year, but Wirfs and Winfield Jr. being in their first year. They've been playing absolutely amazing. I mean, Tristan Wirfs is one of the better right tackles in the entire NFL already, and Antoine Winfield Jr. is a very bright and young upcoming safety. I still want these guys to get some more experience, get more comfortable playing at the NFL level before they take it to the next level by playing in a playoff game. That's a lot of pressure to put on some of these young guys, but I trust Wirfs, I trust Winfield Jr. I think that both these guys can be ready to go for round 1, and it's all about just getting them more reps, getting them more prep time, and playing in as many games as possible, which is why I have them slated to play in Week 17. But with that being said, guys, let's now switch to the other side. Some players that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may want to consider not playing in Week 17, letting them rest up and get ready for that wild card matchup. The first guy that I have listed is Ronald Jones. And it absolutely kills me to put Ronald Jones here because I want him to be a 1,000-yard rusher. I don't know if he would get that mark. He needs 100 yards exactly to do that. But I feel like it would be in everybody's best interests for Ronald Jones to just rest up one more week and then get ready for the wild card matchup, whoever the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would play. The reason I feel this way is because, one, Leonard Fournette has been doing a very solid job at running back, and also Vaughn and lesean McCoy have done some very good things with the limited playing time they've been getting, so it's not an exact necessity to rush Ronald Jones back from all the things that he has had going on, being on the illness list, as well as dealing with a fractured pinky. If he takes one more week to rest up and be ready for that wild card matchup, I think that that would be much better for everybody on this team. But the second player that I have listed is going to be another surprising one. It's going to be Lavonte David. Now, I know everybody's going to freak out and say, James, what the heck do you mean, Lavonte David? Look, right now as it stands, Lavonte David is one of the more senior veteran players on this Buccaneers defense as a whole. I mean, you have Sue, you have Lavonte David, you do have Jason Pierre-Paul, who's very good, and Will Golson. But aside from that, you have guys like Ross Cocker, who's been in the league for a handful of years, Raheem Nunez-Roche, who's been in the league for just a couple of years, Steve McClendon has also been a veteran as well. But in terms of guys who are getting a ton of starting playing time, it's Sue, it's Lavonte David, and that's pretty much it, and Will Golson. So I would rest up Lavonte David simply because of the fact that Devin White can already be there in that game versus the Falcons and just go on an absolute tear. You can play Kevin Minter and Lavonte David's space. Lavonte David, he can rest up, he can get healthy, and he can get ready to play in his first playoff game since he has joined the league. I mean, it really is a crime that Lavonte David has not played in a playoff game so far because he's one of the most underrated NFL players in today's game, period. I don't care what anybody says. So I want Lavonte David to be as healthy as possible, be as ready to go as possible. I'm sure he's one of those guys who would love to play in the Week 17 game, but I would consider having him sit out simply because of the fact that I need him ready to go. He's a strong leader. He's one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL, and he is such an important piece in this Buccaneers defense that I think even, some Bucs fans have actually overlooked him a little bit this year, considering all the great stuff that's been going on with Devin White. People are, again, starting to kind of overlook Lavonte David a little bit. If he is healthy and he is ready to go, he's one of the best linebackers in the league, period. So maybe consider him having sit out week 17 so he can be fully healthy and 100%. The next player that I'm going to mention is going to be one or the other. It's going to be either Shaq Barrett or Jason Pierre-Paul, whichever one you want. Now, Jason Pierre-Paul, I still think, is going to get 2 double-digit sacks on the season. I think he only needs half a sack more. Shaq Barrett, I'm not so sure, unfortunately, which isn't a bad thing because even Khalil Mack has had a year or two where he hasn't gotten double-digit sacks, so it is what it is. But I would consider benching one of those players and playing a guy like Anthony Nelson because of the fact, again, that I want the Buccaneers to have a healthy, fresh, ready-to-go pass rusher who would be just, going crazy in round 1 of the playoffs. Both Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett can fit that bill. Both of them have been to the playoffs multiple times. Both of them have won a Super Bowl before. And I think that both of these guys would do with some rest, one or the other, whichever one you want to pick, and then they can just go crazy in the wild card round, and take advantage of maybe an offensive lineman who might not have gotten rest in week 17. So I would just kind of take a more strategic approach with this and say, okay, Shaq Barrett, you can rest. Jason Pierre-Paul, you play week 17, so that way Shaq Barrett is 100% ready to go in the wild card round, or maybe even the vice versa, because it is going to be very important to have fresh, healthy pass rushers in the playoffs, because that is how you win playoff games, or a big chunk of it, in my opinion, is getting to the opposing quarterback, throwing them off balance, and making them make mistakes. That's how you win any football game, but it's even more prevalent and important in the playoffs. So I'd pick one of those 2 pass rushers and maybe consider them for resting up and getting ready for the wild card round. The second to last thing that I'm going to mention in terms of players who should be considered resting in week 17 is going to be either Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown. Now, I say both of these guys, one or the other, because, again, much like in the case for the pass rushing situation, I want the Buccaneers to have a healthy set of wide receivers, and both Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown are both wide receiver 1 caliber players. So both those guys resting up, both those guys taking some time that they need, or one of those guys taking some time that they need to be ready for a playoff game is going to be absolutely huge. Antonio Brown has been in playoffs multiple times. Chris Godwin has not. If it was my choice, I would probably rest Antonio Brown over a guy like Chris Godwin, simply because of the fact Chris Godwin is younger, he's a little bit more healthier than what Antonio Brown could be, and I think that overall that would be the right move. The final thing that I have to mention here, guys, is players with nagging injuries. There have been plenty of players who have had nagging injuries throughout this season in the secondary, on the offensive line, on the defensive line, and just all over the place, right? Even in the wide receiver core. All of these different types of players have been dealing with so many different types of nagging injuries, and it has not been a fun thing at all. I would consider resting some of those guys, be it backups especially, and maybe a starter or 2 if you feel that is the best thing, especially in that cornerback room, maybe Carlton Davis, maybe Jamel Dean, something like that. Just get those guys healthy. If they are dealing with some nagging injuries, just make sure that they are as ready to go as possible for the playoffs, because the Buccaneers do already have a playoff spot. That is guaranteed. So, having as many backups fresh and maybe having as many starters as fresh, that is important in playoff football. So that is kind of all of my suggestions there. But guys, that is going to be it for this video. Let me know all of your thoughts about what I talked about down in the comments section below, and what are some players that you guys would consider not resting or resting for the Buccaneers Week 17 matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.